The planet of Zalara was an unforgiving wasteland of sharp rocks and thin, cold air shimmering under the weak light of its distant sun. Captain Ethan Reed surveyed the desolate landscape through the viewport of his explorer craft, the hum of the engines a constant companion in the otherwise silent world. "Nothing for miles," muttered Ethan, tapping the navigation panel lightly. "What could they possibly want us to find out here?" His question was rhetorical, intended for his dog, Whiskey, who sat obediently by his side. The dog, an earthbred golden retriever with a keen sense of smell even in the alien terrain, wagged his tail, oblivious to the planet's desolation. As the craft hovered low, Ethan's sensors picked up an unexpected anomaly. "What's that?" He squinted, steering the craft closer. There, amidst the jagged rocks, lay a figure, small, frail, distinctly non-human. "Stay here, boy," Ethan instructed Whiskey, though the excitement in the dog's eyes made it clear he wanted to follow. Suiting up in his protective gear, Ethan made his way to the alien creature. She was an alien princess, Alyria, with skin that shimmered like the stars and eyes wide with fear. She seemed barely conscious, her breaths shallow and uneven. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help," Ethan said softly, checking her for injuries. Alyria flinched at his touch, her eyes filling with a mix of confusion and relief. Why help me?" Her voice was a whisper, carried weakly by the planet's thin air. Ethan smiled gently, lifting her with ease. "Because you need help, and maybe you can help me understand what happened here." As he carried her back to his craft, Alyria looked up at the sky, then at the human who had decided her fate was worth his attention. "I was to die here," she confessed, her voice gaining strength. "My people, they left me." Ethan frowned, settling her into a seat beside Whiskey, who sniffed her curiously, offering a comforting nuzzle. "Well, you're not alone anymore," he assured her. "Let's get you somewhere warm. Can you tell me about your people? Why would they leave you here?" Alyria watched the dog, a smile touching her lips for the first time. "In my world, to be left is to be erased from existence. I am a blight to them, an omen of bad fortune. My survival threatens their beliefs." Ethan listened intently as he piloted the craft back to his base. The story was absurd to him, that a culture could fear one of their own to such an extent. Yet, the loneliness in Alyria's voice resonated with him. He, too, had been outcast in a way, chosen for missions that kept him away from human contact, always the observer, never part of the scene. "You're safe with me, Alyria. My mission out here is to learn, not to judge. Whatever reasons they had, I'm glad I found you," Ethan said. Alyria leaned back, the warmth of the craft seeping into her bones. "I am glad, too, Ethan of Earth," she murmured, her eyelids fluttering closed. Ethan watched her sleep, a plan forming in his mind. He would need to report this, but carefully. First, he needed more information, both from Alyria and from his own observations of Zalara. Whatever the reason for her exile, it had just become a part of his mission. As the craft touched down at the base, Ethan looked at Whiskey, who seemed to have appointed himself as Alyria's guardian. "Looks like it's just us now," he chuckled. "Let's make sure she gets a chance to tell her story." In the safety of his base, with a new guest recovering and a loyal dog by his side, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. Zalara might be barren, but it was no longer just a rock in space to him. It was a place where a new story was about to unfold. Inside the confines of his outpost, Ethan prepared a small, warm meal, something to ease Alyria into the atmosphere of human hospitality. The kitchenette was cramped but well-equipped, testament to Ethan's long tenure in remote locations. Alyria watched curiously from the table, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and caution. "You need to eat something," Ethan said, sliding a plate of gently spiced protein and a cup of warm broth towards her. "It's not much, but it should help you regain your strength." Alyria eyed the food warily, but picked up the utensil, mimicking Ethan's motions. "Is this what humans eat?" she asked, her voice still faint but filled with intrigue. "Some of the time," Ethan chuckled. "We adapt to what's available. Out here, we rely a lot on supplies from Earth, but I try to mix it up. Keeps things interesting." He sat across from her, his own meal in hand, hoping to make the dining experience feel communal and relaxed. As they ate, Ethan decided it was a good opportunity to learn more. So, Alyria, tell me about your people. Why would they consider someone like you bad fortune? Alyria paused, a trace of sadness crossing her delicate features. It is the color of my eyes, she began, hesitant. They are the sign of an ancient curse, or so the stories claim. I bring unrest, they believe. That's a heavy burden for one person to carry, Ethan mused, trying to keep the conversation light yet insightful. We have superstitions back on Earth too, but nothing so severe as to abandon someone. Alyria nodded, her meal momentarily forgotten. What brings you to Zalara, Ethan? Are all humans explorers? Not all, but exploration is in our nature, Ethan replied, his thoughts drifting to the days when he first chose this path. I'm here to survey and report. My findings could determine if this place is suitable for a research base or resource extraction. As they talked, Whiskey trotted over, resting his head on Alyria's knee. She smiled, her hand reaching down to pet him instinctively. And what about him? Does he explore with you? He's more than just a companion. He's saved my skin more than once, Ethan explained, watching the bond forming between his two unlikely companions. Animals and humans, we work together back on Earth. It helps, especially in places like this. The meal ended, and Ethan showed Alyria around the small outpost. He explained the various scientific instruments and what they measured, delighted to see her interest in the technology. Could your tools see why my people fear me? Alyria asked, half joking as she looked at a spectrograph. In a way, Ethan said thoughtfully. They help us understand the world better, make informed decisions rather than rely on fear. As the tour concluded, Ethan led Alyria to a window overlooking the rocky landscape. Tomorrow, if you feel up to it, I could use your help outside. We'll collect samples, maybe learn something that could help both our peoples. Alyria's gaze turned towards the stars, then back to Ethan. I would like that, she said quietly. To help, to learn, and maybe to understand. That night, as Ethan prepared the equipment for the next day's expedition, he considered the strange twist his mission had taken. He hadn't expected to find a companion in this desolate place, nor to engage in bridging worlds not just through rocks and soil, but through shared experiences and newfound friendship. With Alyria by his side, the mission felt revitalized, the objective broader and somehow more significant. As he checked the oxygen levels in their gear, Ethan realized that this partnership might be the key to understanding more than just the geology of Zalara, but perhaps the geology of human and alien relations as well. The morning on Zalara broke with a cold, crisp dawn, the horizon a pale gradient of blues and purples. Ethan had the rover ready, the back filled with sampling tools and protective gear. Alyria approached, dressed in an adapted suit Ethan had modified for her unique physiology. Feels strange, Alyria commented, adjusting the suit's collar. But also, exciting. Ethan grinned, handing her a helmet. You'll get used to it. The suit's designed to keep you safe and comfortable. Ready to be an explorer for a day? Yes, I believe I am, Alyria replied, her voice steadier now, her curiosity overtaking her initial hesitation. As they drove, Ethan explained their objectives. We're going to collect soil and rock samples. I'll teach you how to use the geosampler. It's pretty straightforward. Alyria nodded, watching the landscape change as they ventured further from the outpost. What do you learn from these rocks and soil? A lot. Actually, Ethan said, pulling up to a site he'd marked on his digital map. They tell us about the planet's history, its composition, potential for habitation. Together, they stepped out onto the rugged terrain. Ethan demonstrated how to operate the geosampler, a complex device that drilled into the planetary crust and extracted samples. Alyria watched intently, then took her turn, handling the device with surprising ease. Like this? She asked, looking to Ethan for approval. Exactly like that, he confirmed with a nod, impressed by her quick grasp of the technology. You're a natural. Their conversation flowed easily as they worked, moving from scientific explanations to more personal disclosures. Ethan shared stories of Earth, of oceans and mountains, while Alyria spoke of her homeworld's vast cities and luminous forests. It sounds beautiful, Ethan remarked, genuinely intrigued. It's a shame that such misunderstandings about one's destiny can cause so much fear. Alyria paused, her expression thoughtful. Fear can be a powerful force. It makes us do things we otherwise wouldn't consider, like leaving someone behind. Ethan met her gaze, his eyes kind. Yet here you are, learning to use human tools, exploring a foreign planet with a human. Doesn't that feel like breaking those chains of fear? It does, she admitted, a smile breaking through her reserve. I never imagined such possibilities until now. They continued their work, collecting samples from several locations. Ethan showed Alyria how to record the data on a portable device. This logs everything we need to know about where and when we collected the samples. Helps keep things organized. I see humans like order, Alyria observed, chuckling as she entered data into the device. We do, at least when it comes to science, Ethan agreed with a laugh. Keeps the chaos at bay. As the day drew to a close, they packed up their equipment and headed back to the rover. Alyria looked back at the trail of their footprints, a visible mark of their presence on this otherwise untouched world. Today was more than I expected, she said as they drove back. I feel less like an outsider now. That's good to hear, Ethan replied, steering the rover over the uneven ground. You're part of this mission now, Alyria, and hopefully, part of a new beginning for your people, too. Back at the outpost, as they stored the samples and cleaned their equipment, Ethan noticed Alyria's ease in her new role. She moved with confidence, a stark contrast to the uncertain figure he had found just days before. Thank you, Ethan, for this chance, she said earnestly as they finished their tasks. You earned it, Ethan responded, clapping her on the shoulder gently. Tomorrow, we'll analyze these samples. You'll see the data come to life, telling us stories of this planet's past. Alyria nodded, anticipation bright in her eyes. I look forward to it. That evening, as Ethan reviewed the day's data, he realized how much Alyria's presence had enriched the mission. Not only had she adapted to the tasks, but she had also brought a new perspective, challenging and expanding his own views. This partnership, he thought, might just be the key to more than scientific discovery. It could bridge worlds. The data analysis from the samples collected was underway in the lab corner of Ethan's outpost. The air was filled with the soft whirring of machines as Alyria, now somewhat familiar with the equipment, assisted Ethan in navigating through the results. The monitors flickered with graphs and data points, a digital mosaic of Zalara's geological history. Look at this spike in the mineral content here, Ethan pointed out, gesturing towards the screen. This could indicate a dormant volcanic area nearby. Might be worth investigating tomorrow. Alyria leaned closer to the screen, her interest piqued. Volcanoes? We have those on my planet. They are revered as the creators of new land. Same here, Ethan replied, happy to see her making connections. They can be destructive, but also life-giving. Their close proximity in the cramped lab was new, and it charged the air with a different energy. Ethan was acutely aware of her presence, her subtle scent that didn't match the sterile air of the outpost. He found himself wondering about her world, her life before this exile. Ethan, Alyria's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Why did you become an explorer? Was it to escape something, or to find something? Ethan paused, considering her question. A bit of both, I guess. I wanted to see more than what was given to me, a life predefined by others. Out here, I write my own story. Alyria nodded thoughtfully. I used to think my story ended with my exile. Now, I'm not so sure. The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken words. Ethan broke it by suggesting a break. How about we step outside? There's a meteor shower tonight. It should be a good one. Alyria agreed eagerly, and they prepared some warm beverages to take with them outside. Wrapped in thick jackets against the cold, they found a spot near the outpost where the light pollution was minimal. The sky above was a tapestry of stars, vast and unending. As they watched the sky, meteors streaked across in brilliant arcs, each one a silent spectacle. It's beautiful, Alyria murmured, her voice soft. Yeah, it's moments like these that make all the hardships worth it, Ethan agreed. He glanced at her, finding her face illuminated by the light of a particularly bright meteor. Her beauty struck him anew. not just of form but of spirit, her resilience in the face of her trials. They talked about the stars, about the constellations of Earth and those of Alyria's world. Ethan listened as she described the celestial myths of her people, stories of heroes and monsters, of gods and their whims. It was easy, Ethan noticed, to forget the gulf of experience and species between them when wrapped in the shared wonder of the cosmos. I never thought I'd share this with someone, Ethan confessed. It's always been just me and whiskey out here. Alyria turned to him, her eyes reflecting starlight. And I never thought I'd see stars with a human. My people fear what they do not understand. They would never reach out like this. The air grew colder as the night deepened, but neither made a move to go inside. There was warmth in their closeness, in the shared experience of the universe in its most raw and beautiful form. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low. Alyria, I. She turned to face him fully, her hand reaching out to gently touch his. I know, Ethan. I feel it too. It wasn't just about survival anymore, or about learning. Between them, something delicate yet undeniable had begun to grow, fostered by shared curiosity and kindred spirits beneath the watchful eyes of the stars. They didn't speak much after that, content in their mutual understanding and the comfort of the silence between them. When they eventually walked back to the outpost, their hands remained clasped until the door forced them apart. Inside, as Ethan lay in his bunk later, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would change him in ways he'd never anticipated. Alyria, the alien he'd rescued, was no longer just a guest in his world. She was becoming a part of it, of his story, of him. The next morning, Ethan found Alyria already in the lab, poring over the data from the previous day's samples with an intensity that matched his own. The early light spilled through the small window, casting her in a glow that seemed to unroll her newfound place in this world. Morning, Ethan greeted, his voice rough from sleep. You're up early. Alyria looked up, her eyes bright. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything. This mission, the stars last night, us. Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of emotion. Yeah, last night was something else. He moved to stand beside her, watching as she manipulated the data on the screen. I think we're on the verge of a breakthrough with these samples. This could really help my people understand Zalara's potential. That's good, Alyria said, her voice soft. She then turned to face him, her expression serious. Ethan, I've been thinking about what all of this, means for us. Ethan felt his heart quicken. And I think I'm scared, she admitted. Scared but also hopeful. What we have, it's new to me, Ethan. My people don't what? Ethan asked gently, closing the distance between them. They don't form connections like this. Not with outsiders, Alyria explained, her gaze steady on his. But I feel something, Ethan. With you. Ethan reached out, his hand cupping her face softly. I feel it too, Alyria. It's not just you. The tension between them felt charged, full of an unspoken promise. Ethan leaned in, his breath mingling with hers. May I? He asked, an inch away from her lips. Yes, she whispered, and that was all the confirmation he needed. Their kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, as if both were testing the waters of this new territory. But soon, it deepened, driven by the feelings they had held back. Alyria's arms wrapped around Ethan's neck, pulling him closer, and he responded by tightening his grip around her waist. When they finally parted, they were breathless. I've never, Alyria started, her cheeks flushed. Me neither, Ethan replied, his voice low. Not like this. They spent the day working side by side, their interactions now colored with a new intimacy. The lab work, usually mundane, felt different as they shared smiles and occasional touches, a silent language of their growing connection. As evening approached, Ethan stopped Alyria as she was about to analyze another sample. Let's take a break, he suggested. Have dinner with me? Outside, under the stars again? Alyria's smile was all the answer he needed. That night, they sat close together, their dinner forgotten as they talked about dreams, those they had achieved and those still forming. Alyria spoke of her home, of the sights she missed, and Ethan shared his wanderlust, his desire to see new worlds. It's strange, Alyria mused, looking up at the sky. I used to dream of escaping my fate. Now, I dream of exploring it with you. Ethan took her hand, entwining their fingers. Let's make new dreams then, you and I together. The night deepened around them, the stars bearing witness to their burgeoning love. They stayed there until the cold forced them indoors, wrapped in blankets in each other's arms. Back inside, as they prepared for bed, the reality of their situation settled in. They were two beings from different worlds, yet somehow they had found a common ground. Ethan looked at Alyria, her face serene in the dim light, and felt a profound gratitude. "Good night, Alyria," he said softly, his voice carrying all the depth of his feelings. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, her voice equally tender. As Ethan lay in his bunk, listening to the quiet sounds of the outpost, he realized that no matter what the future held, these moments with Alyria would remain etched in his heart forever. Their journey was just beginning, but it was theirs, and it was filled with the promise of countless tomorrows. The quiet days of companionship and discovery were interrupted when Ethan's communicator chimed urgently. A message from Earth Command. He looked over at Alyria, who was sorting samples across the room, her expression content and focused. It was a moment he'd hoped to delay, but the arrival of the message forced the issue. "Alyria," he called, his voice more serious than usual. She looked up, catching the tone immediately. "What is it?" "Earth Command wants an update. They're also asking about you," he admitted, holding up the communicator. "They somehow got wind of my unexpected find. I'd mentioned your assistance with the research, but I didn't expect such a strong reaction." Alyria moved closer, her eyes studying his face. "Are they angry?" "Not angry, just cautious," Ethan said, trying to frame it diplomatically. "They want me to explain everything about you. Who you are, why you were left here, how you've been helping with the research. But, more than that, I think they're worried about what your presence here means for interplanetary relations." A shadow crossed Alyria's face, the familiar doubt returning. "Then they don't trust me?" Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "It's not that, Alyria. It's protocol. They're just careful. My superiors want to avoid any misunderstandings. They've always operated on caution." She looked down at their joined hands, silent for a moment. "Ethan, if you tell them everything, they might force us apart. They could demand I go back to my people, or confine me somewhere to avoid any risk. I won't let that happen," Ethan said firmly. "We'll explain it on our terms, and I'll make them see how important you've been to this mission. They'll understand. And if they don't," he paused, weighing his words, "then I'll find a way for us to stay together. I promise." Alyria studied his face, her expression softening. "I believe you, Ethan." With a renewed determination, they set up a secure video link, Ethan briefing Earth Command while Alyria listened quietly beside him. As he described her role in the research, he emphasized her contributions and skills, downplaying her status as a discovery and highlighting her as an equal partner. The figure on the other end of the screen, General Harris, leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "Captain Reed, you're telling me this individual from an alien civilization has been fully integrated into your mission?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied confidently. "Alyria's knowledge has been invaluable. She's adapted to our equipment and protocols. In fact, I'd go so far as to say her insights have pushed our research further than expected. I consider her essential to the success of our mission." The general raised an eyebrow. "And what's her perspective on this partnership?" Alyria took a deep breath, glancing at Ethan before addressing the screen. "My people left me behind because they feared what I represent. But I have found a purpose here, helping Ethan understand Zalara. I want to continue this work, and I want to be with him." Harris regarded them both with a scrutinizing gaze. "There are potential risks in fostering this kind of relationship between two worlds, Captain Reed. Protocol is to limit interspecies interactions to preserve neutrality." "With all due respect, General," Ethan interjected, "this isn't just protocol for us. It's about progress. Alyria and I have proven that our worlds can work together without conflict. Our work here could be the start of something positive, a real bridge between civilizations." The general was silent for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. I'll need to discuss this with the council, Captain. For now, continue your research. But know that this situation is highly unusual and delicate. As the screen went dark, Ethan exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the exchange lift slightly. He turned to Alyria, who was watching him with an uncertain expression. Do you think they'll separate us? She asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. Ethan shook his head. I won't let them. We'll show them that we're more than just two people from different worlds. We're a team. That evening, they sat outside, leaning against each other as they watched the stars above Zalara. The conversation with Earth Command had stirred a new sense of urgency, a reminder of how precarious their situation was. Yet, being together, sitting side by side in the silence, their resolve only grew stronger. Ethan, Alyria whispered, thank you for standing by me. I know this is complicated, but you've made it feel simple. He looked at her, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. It's simple because I know what I want, Alyria. I want us. No matter what comes next. They sat in comfortable silence, their connection deepening as they shared the quiet of the night. In a world where their bond would be questioned and scrutinized, it was these small, silent moments that spoke the loudest, solidifying the understanding and affection they had for one another. Whatever the future held, they knew one thing for sure. They would face it together. The days passed in tense anticipation, with Ethan and Alyria waiting for Earth Command's final decision. They continued their research, but the looming uncertainty hung over every task, every quiet moment shared. Finally, the message came through, a video call from General Harris. Ethan activated the screen, and the general's stern face filled the display. Captain Reed, after deliberation, the council has decided that your continued partnership with Alyria presents too many unknown variables. We're ordering her relocation to a neutral research facility. Ethan felt a cold surge of anger, his voice tight. General, with all due respect, Alyria has been invaluable here. Relocating her would disrupt everything we've achieved. It would also separate us, and I won't support that. The general's gaze hardened. This isn't a negotiation, Captain. It's a direct order. Alyria, who had been quietly listening beside Ethan, spoke up. General Harris, I chose to stay here because I believe in what we're doing. Removing me against my will would only fuel more fear and mistrust between our worlds. The general raised an eyebrow. You're implying you would refuse to cooperate? Yes, Alyria said firmly, glancing at Ethan for support. I would. My place is here, with him, completing this mission. The general's eyes shifted back to Ethan. Are you prepared to risk your career over this, Captain? Ethan straightened, unwavering. Yes, sir. Alyria isn't just my partner in research. She's my partner in every way that matters. I stand by her decision to stay. There was a long silence as the general seemed to weigh their words, his expression unreadable. Then you both understand the consequences. Any further findings you submit will be reviewed strictly, and the council may take action to prevent further alliances like yours. You'll be watched closely. Ethan met the general's gaze without flinching. Understood. The screen went dark, and Ethan turned to Alyria, his hand finding hers. Looks like we're on our own, he said softly, squeezing her fingers. Alyria's expression softened, relief mingling with determination. Then we'll make this work. Together. They spent the evening finalizing their findings, working side by side in a silence that felt more like harmony than tension. As the last of their data uploaded, Alyria leaned into Ethan, resting her head on his shoulder. We chose each other, despite everything, she whispered, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Ethan nodded, his arm wrapping around her. And whatever comes next, I'll face it with you. The morning brought with it a strange calm. Ethan and Alyria worked together in silence, knowing that today would mark the last day of their mission on Zalara. The lab was empty of any new data to collect. Everything that mattered was packed and ready for transport. The air felt heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts and the uncertainty of what awaited them once they left the isolation of the outpost. Feels strange, doesn't it? Alyria broke the silence, glancing over at Ethan. Knowing that this place, These last few months will be just a memory soon. Yeah, he replied, meeting her gaze. I've never felt this way about any mission before. You've changed things, Alyria. Changed me. A small smile tugged at her lips. And you, Ethan? I feel complete. Something I never thought possible before meeting you. They stepped outside, the landscape bathed in the pale light of Zalara's dawn. The sky was streaked with soft purples and blues, a view that had become familiar yet still held a quiet magic. Ethan reached for Alyria's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. So, he said, looking out at the horizon, what's next for us? She turned to him, her gaze steady. We find a way to make this work. Whatever our people decide, we'll create a space that belongs to us. Whether it's here, on Earth, or somewhere in between. He nodded, the determination in her voice giving him strength. I like the sound of that. We've already faced the hardest parts together. What's a little more red tape? They laughed, and Ethan felt the last of his worries ease away. Together, they had already defied conventions, pushing the boundaries of what was deemed possible, and now, standing hand in hand, he knew they could face anything. As the transport ship finally arrived to retrieve them, Ethan helped Alyria with her things, their touches lingering. Whiskey trotted along beside them, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, but happy to be with his two favorite companions. When they reached the shuttle, Alyria paused, looking back at the outpost that had been both their prison and their sanctuary. She glanced at Ethan, a mixture of sadness and hope in her eyes. This place, it feels like the beginning of something much bigger than we'll ever know, she murmured. Ethan nodded, wrapping his arm around her. Then let's make it the start of our story. A story we'll write together. They boarded the ship, the engines roaring to life beneath them, taking them away from the quiet world where they had found each other. As Zalara grew smaller in the distance, they sat side by side, looking forward to the new dawn ahead, whatever it held. For them, the journey had only just begun.